Have you guys ever wanted to play an old game, but you don't want to have to dig up all the old hardware, or you don't want to have to track down a game that hasn't been made for over 20 years? Well, with my new home arcade system, now you don't have to do any of that, because it can play games as far back as Atari 2600 with games such as the old Pac-Man, they have Space Invaders, and things like And it can go to all the way as recent as the PlayStation X, so most PlayStation games can play. For my demonstration, I'll be playing Smash Bros. Would a member from the audience like to play? Alright. Let's see. Yeah. Slightly tilted. Alright, let's work. Alright, so this is attack, special attack, and multiple shot.
You should say that. That sounds dangerous.
Oh man. What, 64?
Yes, so
Not my game.
What's the game?
we're playing Smash Bros, the oldest Smash Bros, so all of the characters are extremely blocky. Yeah. Alright, here.
Yeah.
Could you show it on the side too?
Oh,
You can pick it up. No,
yeah.
Put it
you
on.
guys won't be able to see.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, cool.
You guys are blindly attacking each other.
Alright, here we go.
Wow. Who's winning?
Oh man, I'll try.
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah.
Come on, man, box is top, dude. You got this.
Oh no. Rob's much better at this than I am. I'm sad he's doing all this.
Oh man. Oh my god. It's gonna be fun because there's
Oh.
I can't see.
Oh, there. Oh no.
Oh.
Oh no, but I think you're better off than I am.
Rob.
Rob. Oof.
Oh, it's easy.
Oof.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, it's just like Smash.
Get on. Give myself a chance. Alright, hopefully.
Good game.
So as you can see, it can run with both controllers, and I basically control it using these two joysticks, and it runs RetroPie, which is basically a variant of Raspbian, which is a commonly used operating system for the Raspberry Pi 3. And it displays onto the monitor, and I made the stands and the case myself. So, however, in getting here I had a lot of problems. One of the biggest ones was that the tutorial that I was going to follow didn't actually, it was extremely vague, and a lot of the links and software that they had provided were either out of use or extremely outdated, so it didn't actually run all that well. So I had to search around for, I think, like 3 solid days just trying to find different software, which is how I found RetroPie, which is the software I'm using now. And another problem I ended up having was when trying to get my, when trying to write the disk image onto the SD card so that I could play it, the software that the tutorial had recommended, again, did not work, so I had to find a new one. And at this point, I decided to ditch the tutorial entirely, so I was basically doing this blind. So once I finally managed to write my image file onto the SD card and was able to get it up and running, I started to run into problems where the controllers that the tutorial, again, had recommended did not work, surprise, surprise. And then another problem later on where I had, when I was trying to set up 2 players, I had a keyboard and an Xbox controller. The keyboard would control both player 1 and player 2 simultaneously, and I later found that the problem was that the keyboard always controlled player 1, So when I had set it as player 2, it was controlling player 1 and 2 simultaneously. So I later fixed this just by switching the keyboard back to player 1 and the Xbox controller to player 2. My time at BlueStamp has taught me a lot. Like, I can actually do things that I didn't think I would be capable of. Like, before this, I had no clue what a disk image was. I would have just said, oh, do I just put that onto a disk and does it just show me an image? Something stupid like that. But it's taught me a lot, and in the end, I think I'm better off for it. Thank you. Any questions?
Asking for a friend, how good's your documentation?
It's been pretty good.
Alright, we'll talk tomorrow.
So how many video games can you fit on it?
Ooh, quite a few since it's a large SD card. It's 32 gigs. I think, let's see. I have a bunch of the old, I have like all the Mario games, like Zelda, Mortal Kombat, requested by Ender here. I have Sega 32. I have Simpsons games, which are apparently very popular around here.
Not a question, just a comment and a congratulations. So, one of the standard interview questions that we have for students is, what do you love to do? And 80% of students will lie to us and say, we love to like read books. And I'll be like, which book? And they'll be like, I don't know. and they fess up. But like 20% of students, especially in Palo Alto, will say, I love to play video games, which is true. And you just see their parents like hide in shame. It's like, so I just want to congratulate you for really proving out your passion.